All right, so here we go. Now we are adding fractions. All right, so we're going to start with a visual representation of adding fractions. So we've kind of seen a visual of, what 1/4 looks like, or 1/3, or any real fractional representation, the part to the whole. When we add them, it's exactly what you would think. We're taking two of those pictures and we're putting them together. We start with common denominators, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's denominators that are the same, because as you would think, when those denominators are not the same, it does complicate things, because if we're putting two of these pictures together, if they are not the same, that makes our life more difficult. So, beginning, we have 1/4 and 1/4, so we're going to put those together and color. So we have 1 and another 1, which gives us 2/4. But we can't leave it like that, because we have to always simplify. So even if in the directions it does not say to simplify, this is always an understood direction. Always do it. Okay? So you always must simplify. So what that means is, if you can divide out any common number, a GCF, if you will, you need to do it. So you can kind of tell from the visual representation, 2/4 is really 1/2 of that circle. How we would do it numerically is, if you have even numbers, if you have both of them divisible by 3 or 5, or really any number, that's what you want to pull out. So I see that both of these are even numbers, so I'm going to divide both of them by 2. And I'm going to get 1/2. And that's going to be my answer. All right. So the next one, I have 1/3 and 1/3. So I have 2 of those sections that I can color in. And that is going to make my answer 2/3. 2 and 3 don't have a common GCF, or greatest common factor. They don't have a number that's common to be divided out or divisible between the two. So I'm done. 2/3 is my answer. 1/6 and 2/6. I have to color 3/6. Again, looking at that visually, you can see that it's 3/6 or 1/2. I can divide out a 3, leaving me again with 1/2. 3/10 and 5/10 gives me 8. 8/10. Again, those both being even numbers, I can cut those both in half and get 4/5. And then the last one, 2/8 and 4/8 is going to give me 6/8. And you can kind of see visually that gives me 3/4. But again, I can cut them both in half, dividing them both by 2 to get 3/4. All right, so taking the visual away, how would I add fractions? The most important thing about adding fractions, you are going to add the numerator. Remember, the numerator is the top number. Do not touch the denominator. You are going to simplify if you can. And above all else, you're going to make sure denominators match before you start. If you do not have common denominators, you cannot add or subtract, but we'll get there. All right, so we're just adding at this point. So in letter A, all right, you do have your common denominators. They're both 8s, so you can begin. We're going to add the numerators. 5 plus 5 gives me 10. I don't touch the bottom. 8. And now I see if I can simplify. They're both even numbers, so I'm going to cut them both in half, and I get 5 over 4. And I'm done simplifying, and I'm done. Letter B. I check my denominators. They're both 10, so I'm good to go. I add my numerators, 9 plus 7 or 7 plus 9. I get 16. I leave my denominator alone, 10. They're both even. I cut them both in half. I get 8 over 5, and I'm done. Letter C, I check my denominators. They're both 12. I add my numerators. I get 18. I leave my denominators alone. They're both even. I cut them both in half. I get 9 over 6. Now, the last two I've said I'm done because I haven't been able to pull anything out after I've cut them in half. But for this one, 9 and 6 are both divisible by 3. Now, what that means is at my first step, I could have pulled out a bigger number. Those are actually both divisible by 6. Remember, you can look for the GCF, which is the greatest common factor. When I cut them both in half, meaning I just divided by 2, I pulled out a factor. I didn't pull out the GCF. I didn't pull out the greatest factor. So when I just pull out a factor, I have to pull out another factor in the next step. So here, 9 and 6, they're both divisible by 3. So I have to do 9 divided by 3 to get me another 3. And I have to do 6 divided by 3 to get me a 2. So now I have 3 over 2, which actually is my final answer. All right, in letter D, I have the hundreds on the bottom, which are common. So I add the tops to get 150 over 100. Now, anytime I have a numerator and a denominator that both have an end of 0, I can actually cross them out. So now I have 15 over 10. Those are both divisible by 5. So I get 3 and 2. Now, I can leave it as an improper fraction. And this is going to make your life very easy and very nice, and you're going to like this very much. With decimals, you have to round, you have to worry about rounding, you have to worry about rounding to the right place. Improper fractions, you just leave it. You don't have to divide, you don't have to make it into a mixed number, you don't have to worry about anything. Just leave it. Simplify and leave it. All right. Letter E. All 3 of those have denominators of 5, so we're just going to add the numerators. So 1 plus 1 plus 2 gives me 4. Leave my denominator alone. No simplifying, so I'm done. And letter F. All 3 have a denominator of 20, so I'm going to add my numerators. 3 plus 1 plus 8 is 12 over 20. I do have to simplify there because they're both even. When I pull out a 2 or divide by 2, I get 6 over 10. They're both still even, so again, I divide by 2. I get 3 over 5, and now I can't divide anything else, so I am done. All right, add the following mixed numbers. So now I'm just throwing something else into the mix. I want to not deal with mixed numbers. I want to deal with improper fractions if I can. So I want to turn them into improper fractions. And remember, improper fractions can look like a number over itself. So I'm going to keep that in mind. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to worry about the 1 per se, but I am going to do the 2 1/3 for a second. So 2 1/3 is 2 times 3 plus 1. So 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So this is 7 over 3. Now, if I want to add that with 1, that means I want to have a denominator of 3, right? Because I want my denominators to match. How would I get a denominator of 3 where when I divide it, it's equal to 1? Well, my numerator would have to be equal to 3 because 3 divided by 3 is really equal to 1, right? 3 over 3 is equal to 1. So 3 over 3 is equal to 1 plus 7 over 3, which is the 2 1/3, and I'm ready to go. My 3's match on the bottom. My numerators are ready to go. 3 plus 7 is 10 over 3, and I'm done. All right, let's try this next one. So 4 times 5 plus 1. Remember, I know my denominator already because my denominator for my mixed number going to my improper fraction is always the same. So that's going to stay a 5. Whatever it started with, it's going to end with. So 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 is 21 over 5. Now I'm going to add, and I want my denominator to be 5. But now I have to work backwards a little bit. This has to be equal to 2, but I have to have a denominator of 5. So over here, I needed a denominator of 3, but when I divided this, I had to equal 1. Here, I need a denominator of 5, but when I divide, I need it to equal 2. So what divided by 5 equals 2? What divided by 5 equals 2? What divided by 5 equals 2? It's 10. 10 divided by 5 equals 2. All right, so now I have my matching denominators. I'm ready to add, and I get 31 over 5. And I'm done. All right, a couple more. Looking at my denominators, I'm really good to go, but they are mixed numbers, which isn't good for me. Mixed numbers are going to mess you up, especially you might think like, well, why are they going to mess you up? They're going to mess you up, especially if you end up with a situation where you end up having to regroup. So remember, you're adding, but if you end up in a situation where you have to regroup, you're going to be in a position where now you have to regroup and you're regrouping with fractions and it's just going to get messy. Improper fractions are really, really the way to go, I promise. Okay, so we're going to practice putting these into improper fractions here. So we're multiplying this, adding this, multiplying this, adding this. We know our denominator's 10 here. We know our denominator's 10 here. So 10 times 8 is 80, plus 1 is 81. 10 times 7 is 70, plus 3 is 73 here. Okay, we know our denominators match, so we're just adding the numerators. We're keeping our denominator, and we get 154. They're both even, so I'm cutting them in half. When I cut that in half, I get 5. When I cut the top in half, I get 154 divided by 2. 2 goes into 15 7 times. That gets me 14. 1, bring down the 4, 77. All right, so I get 77 over 5. All right, here, letter D. I know I have a 12 as the denominator. I get 12 times 6 plus 1, 72 plus 1, 73. 12 times 4 is 48 plus 1 is 49. 12 is my denominator. And when I add 73 plus 49, I get 11, 12, 122. They're both even, so I cut them in half. I get 6 on the bottom. 122 divided by 2. 2 goes into 12 6 times. Bring down the 2. 2 goes into 2 1 time. So I get 61 over 6. All right, this next one, I get a 3 as my denominator. I get 26 on the top, and I get 20 on the top. So I have 26 over 3 plus 20 over 3, which means I get 46 over 3. That does not simplify. And then I have 6's on the bottom. I have 31 over 6. And I have 49 over 6. Which means I have 80 over 6. They're both even, so I have 40 over 3. And that's all that one simplifies to. And that about does it. Once you get the hang of putting it into an improper fraction, it should become, and simplifying, it should become easier, especially when you have like denominators. So practice that, and I will see you on our live.